now people are actually finding out about it, that their locations and whereabouts are being triangulated. And when any government wants to, or when the US government wants to, they can activate your phone as not only a tracking device, but a two-way listening device. So they've had incidents where that was used as well. So, brave new world, man.
That's good, no? It's like, you're lost, for example, I lost my son, like, on the trip.
If only they could use it for that, eh? They watch us so much, why don't they find some of the missing children if they're going to spy on us all day and night?
Well, obviously, those children didn't have their cell phone.
They can put a little strip of something on ATM that captures, if they are remotely captures information.
Yeah.
Well,
and I'll tell you, if it would have something to do, and actually Saturday, at lunch there, I'll give you guys another little talk about fractals. And one of the interesting things where fractals transfer over to information technology. First of all, do you know what a fractal is? Well, a fractal is a type of geometry. If you were to take a pattern, an equation, a line, you chop it into 3, and then you get rid of the middle part, and you keep doing that to each end of the equation, you get a pattern that looks like this. It basically keeps dividing, and it keeps dividing, and it keeps dividing. Well, that's a mathematical formula called, it's called a fractal geometry. Now, the use of fractal geometry, and at first I figured, well, so what? You found a pattern that repeats itself in geometry, what's the relevance? Well, they find out that when they measure things like a coastline, if you measure the coastline of Britain, you could use, miles, and it will get you an estimation of the coastline of Britain. And if you break it down into smaller measurements, you get a more precise measurement. And if you break it down further still, you get a further, more accurate measurement of the coastline. Well, when they apply fractal geometry to measuring coastlines, they get extremely accurate predictions of the actual length of coastlines. The other thing where they use it that is absolutely fantastic is when they when they research forests, one of the first things they'll do is they'll take a tree like an oak tree, and they measure all the locations and increments of all of the branches and leaves and width and all of that, and from that they get every tree, everything's own fractally geometric pattern. So the measurements of the tree breaks down to fractal geometry like a signature for oak trees. So they can predict where the branches are going to divide and where they're going to thicken and all these different things with accuracy. Then they take that pattern and they find out that if they take an acre of oak forest and they chart where all the trees are, that falls into a fractal pattern which is repeatable in predicting how many oak trees, what size, and what the spread is for oak forests. So not only does the fractal pattern of the tree predict the actual design of the tree, but it predicts the location of the trees in an acre, and it's repeatable throughout the forest as long as it's that heterogeneous. And if there's other plants, they add their signatures into it, and again, they could get pretty accurate readings on the combination of maple, oak, and pine, and a coniferous forest, or whatever. So that's what fractal geometry is. Now, where that gets interesting for us is, well, in cell phones and in all kinds of chips and cards and in advanced monitoring and tracking devices, okay, an antenna used to be, and they used to say a sophisticated antenna was like the ones you have in your book. You know when you go buy a book and you flip open the pages and you see a little sticker and it's got an antenna like this? Okay, it's just it's a security feature where if you go through the barcode thing, it'll go off. Well, this is pretty good for an antenna, but let me bring you into the latest generation, which they've kept nice and hush-hush and only rolled out a little bit in cell phones. Well, there's fractal antennas. So what's a fractal antenna? It looks something like this. You could probably go to Google and get a cooler drawing than I can give you. But it's basically an antenna that has all these little fractally geometric patterns. and they make an antenna like this. And this fractal antenna can hit all frequencies that it needs to. And if you want to make an antenna that supports more frequencies, you simply use fractal geometry to generate the pattern that'll receive it. So every frequency hits a particular little area of the antenna, and it hits all these ranges. So you can have one antenna that does Bluetooth, one antenna that does G3, G4, this, that, the other things. So now you see fractal geometry coming into IT in terms of antennas. Well, let me give you a hint. What about fractal mathematics and intrusion detection systems? What about fractal mathematics and intrusion prevention systems? What about fractal mathematics in phishing scams? What about fractal mathematics in virus propagation? What about fractal geometry in virus writing? Now, that's the next generation of everything you've seen. And that's where we get into quantum computing, and that's why I know they can do it. Because quantum computing uses fractal geometry and the positions of electrons and light in this crystal quartz kind of environment, and they have computing that is infinitely beyond us. Keep in mind that the NSA, this is their public statements, are always 35 to 50 years ahead of us in their technology. In 1950, they said their computing was 35 years ahead of what's in the public. They've publicly stated that they never release an encryption standard that they can't double to decrypt. So if we're using 256, they can decrypt 512. So think of that. Think of the implications of that. Think of the implications of them being able to use this kind of tracking device and fractal kind of geometry to predict patterns of behavior in human psychology. That's where they're at. We're still very much at a linear bobo level of a lot of things. But when you start looking at real predictive mathematics and fractal geometry, you get very sophisticated prediction devices.
Game theory, is that related?
Game theory?
Yeah.
I haven't gone into the details of game theory. Can you sum it up for me?
Well, it's a prediction of the human behavior. It's very... I'm not aware.
It's hard to describe.
It's really hard.
I've come across
theory.
Yes. There you go. You can see there's a fractal antenna there. Again, it's got different patterns. And again, all you do is you punch into basically a software what frequencies you want to hit, and it will output a fractal antenna that'll hit those ranges that you want if it's physically possible. It's much like subnetting. So yeah, that's it. And if you want, look up the Mandelbrot set, which was the first. The way they detected this, you're going to like this. The way they detected that there was this repeating pattern, because the first Mandelbrot set, the guy that determined this fractal pattern, was trying to troubleshoot telecom lines. So he was looking at phone lines, and they found out that there seemed to be an interference pattern that would come up in a repeating pattern, always like that. It's like the heartbeat of the universe is caught on all of our lines, our power lines, our telecom lines, and what are they? Well, the filters that we use get rid of this universal interference pattern that pops up. And from this, this guy Mandelbrot, he calculated what that was, and he got a fractal patterning. And that fractal patterning is the first one you'll see if you look up fractals. It's the pattern you're going to see commonly repeated. So what does that really look like geometrically? How do we draw something like that? Well, you start off with, and again, triangles are easier for me. So you start off with triangles, an even spread of them, and then you do triangles on each end of it. Again, mine's not going to be as pretty as it could be. And then we keep doing triangles smaller. Again, it's a repeating pattern. Whatever, it's not going to look nice there either. And basically, as this sequence continues, a beautiful picture that seems to be tranquilizing or stimulating to the human mind progresses, and it starts to unfold further and further and further out. And you think you're looking at a different picture as it transitions and unfolds in front of you, but really what you're getting is more of the same pattern. And then you start to realize, hey, this is the same pattern unfolding, 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 unfolding in front of me. So it just depends on what, again, here I use triangles, but you have all these different triangles and patterns and shapes that unfold like that. Yes?
Do you believe in symbolism?
Absolutely.
So there you draw David, Magen David.
I don't call it, I would call it the Merkaba.
Yeah. But are you aware of that history?
Pretty much, but there's a lot of different history for symbolism.
There was a lot of different, but basically the David, he had this sign on his shield, and so maybe there's some connections that he was always protected by this kind of
that's
shield,
symbol.
like it has a kind of magic power.
I agree, and I think it does, and I'll tell you why. Well, I'll tell you from my perspective what all that means. This one down is the divine feminine, or your connection to the earth. This one that's going up is the divine masculine, the one going up to spiritual realm. And what happens is when you go into a meditative state, you envision this triangle pointing up, rotating around you, a tetrahedron. You envision the other one rotating, going down. And basically, in my view, you get an area of peace in the middle. So basically, what it would appear to be is some kind of torsion field. So it seems to be a psychologically stimulated torsion field that once it gets going, it seems to create this area of peace in the middle. And the meditative practices that, again, what you're referring to, again, it could be Kabbalah, it could be any kind of meditative, transcendental meditative state, allows you to go in there, and from that location, again, that's the launch pad for a lot of different things that you can manipulate your body to do. So, anyway, on Saturday I'll talk about some of this stuff, and I'll expand on some of that frequency stuff unless there's any questions. It's cool though, eh? The fractal patterning and the antennas, and
So we surely took that thing from there, like some not technology, not from our planet, like
Sure.
Because there's many stories about that sign, and
okay, so I will tell you. Okay, look, if you ask me, all language actually goes back to shapes, to geometry. So at a higher level, I would say a higher dimension, everything makes major archetypal shapes, like a square, a circle, a triangle, whatever. And each of those different shapes has a different effect on the human consciousness. So why do I think that? Well, you can go all throughout the animal kingdom, and you can find animals responding to shapes. Well, a turkey, when you want to stimulate it to mate, you put on a little stick, a square piece of wood, and the turkey sees that piece of wood and it's go time. It jumps on that piece of wood and it's going at it like crazy, but what is it? It's a piece of plywood shaped in a square. But what it did is it triggered an archetypal desire in the turkey to stimulate breeding season. Well, I don't know how far I want to go with this, but if you have a few minutes, I'll explain, and I'll tie it into exactly what I was talking about the other day with the fields around the planet. My belief is that we, first of all, have our own field, a field of energy or of magnetism or whatever you want to call it, biophotons or photonic light or whatever that's around us. And when we come together, there's all kinds of scientific tests proving that we synchronize our heartbeats. So in a classroom alone, my heartbeat would follow a certain pattern, which again, they don't know what it's on. I would say it's probably the 528 pattern of the universe, same as the Mandelbrot pattern. And when people come together in an environment and they start to communicate and connect, their heart rhythms are reflected in one another. So in my heartbeat, if you do an ECG, you could, if you were able to have sensitive enough material and strip it all down, we could get everybody's heartbeat from that reading. And it shows that as we get together in groups, we seem to harmonize and we synchronize in some way. Now, why is that relevant? Well, when we look at team dynamics and when people get together in a group and work together, they actually change abilities. Well, what does that mean? That means that when a rowing team is in a group, they have a higher threshold of pain because they're in a group